Thank you very, very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I think I'm going to repeat some of what Ursula and Jo have said from a slightly different perspective and slightly differently. But before I do, I just looked at the attendance list. What a fantastic, diverse mix of interests. And to be honest, I feel a tiny bit humble in front of you, this audience of experts. Really, it is phenomenal, and I think the organisers of today's event should be congratulated for reaching so far and so deep into our communities. So of course I'm really pleased to speak to today's conference, but mostly because our members in the not-for-profit sector are facing huge challenges in delivering their work, as we've heard, as grants, those that remain, and funding are slashed, contracts renegotiated, their pay pushed downwards, allowances cut, and of course the constant fear about jobs. And of course, for all of our members, the real distress at times, it's knowing that you're not able to help the person. You're not able to advocate for their rights or to support them as you want to because of a lack of resources, a lack of time, and of course, overarching punitive government policy. And so, with all of this facing our members, I have to say, all of our members who work in civil society, not-for-profit and community and youth organisations, I found it quite difficult to think of three main challenges, which is what I was asked to do, facing civil society organisations, and then suggest in a succinct way ways of meeting those challenges. But I'm going to start with what I think is the biggest. And as they say, it's the economy, stupid. Because not only are we back in recession, but we're suffering the weakest recovery, the longest slump in modern British economic history. As an aside, I had a meeting with the Government Bank of England representing our members in construction, and Mervyn King said it is the worst economic slump that this country has ever faced. And it isn't because of an accident this is happening, it's a direct consequence of the government's ideology and policies, harsh spending cuts, and the belief in the primacy, as we've heard Ursula say, in the primacy, that belief that the private rather than public is good, and by extension public ownership is bad. And that's what's defining the industrial, political and campaigning terrain that we're all navigating. So in Unite, we're really clear that rather than cutting public spending, we should be investing and improving our social security, welfare state, our public services and transport. Yeah, and we should be building new homes and supporting manufacturing and new green technologies, because we know all those measures would create healthy economic growth and jobs. And so, as a union with members right across the economy, we believe in a well-resourced, comprehensive and universal public service with civil society, not-for-profit and community organisations as a well-resourced, value-added extra, not on-the-cheap replacements. The relentless drive to slash public spending and public services is behind the outsourcing and privatisation agenda, in a bid to provide minimum services on the cheap to government, but making profit for their friends in business. So that brings me to the second challenge, competitive tendering. Again, Ursula and Jo have touched on this, but competitive tendering is a mechanism being used to drive down costs and is ensuring what I think actually lays behind Cameron's big society concept, and that's privatisation. Because the not-for-profit organisations and any staff mutuals that are set up are being given the opportunity to compete against large companies to win contracts. And in many areas, it's the private companies, not good quality, not-for-profit organisations that we know are winning contracts. Because in the current economic climate, being created by the government, more and more of those contracts are being decided on cost, and that can, as we now know, have devastating consequences. I just want to chuck a couple of statistics at you. Now, social care is about 84 contracted from the private and the not-for-profit sector, 84%. So in an investigation last year by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, an organisation itself came across many local authorities where contracts were weighted with decisions based 70% on cost. Is that familiar to this audience? 70% on cost and the remainder on quality. And one where 80% of marks were awarded on the basis of cost.
85,
85. I mean, it's phenomenal and devastating. Only a third of providers interviewed by the Equality and Human Rights Commission said that local authority rates support them to promote and provide a human rights approach to social care. No wonder social care is in crisis. And a third of local authorities reported that they've negotiated lower contracts with home care providers over the previous year. I mean, I just have to reflect for a moment on what that means for us in our community, in particular for our older citizens and cared for children. And the third challenge flows from the workings of competitive tendering and the race to the bottom we're seeing in pay, terms and conditions of workers in the not-for-profit sector. Staff are working longer hours for less pay, under greater pressure, because for many organisations their biggest costs are their staff, and that's where they're making savings. So how do we start to meet those challenges? Well, we're talking about politically challenging and defeating a dominant political narrative, not just restricted to government, that we need to slash public spending. And I emphasise not just restricted to government. This is at the root of the contract negotiation, pay cuts, competitive tendering and funding losses of our members employed by the not-for-profit organisations. And it's not just party politics, as the adverts from the Election Commission said a few years ago. If you don't do politics, what do you do? Politically challenging this idea that there's no money left involves building up a campaign nationally from local communities, such as you here today, and organising wider than the workplace, as Joe touched on. We need to campaign with local councillors, tenants groups, community groups, faith groups, as well as our sympathetic MPs. And that's why Unite has launched its community membership to begin this process. As well as our industrial work in organising and defending the rights and living standards of our members, we're politically challenging what's causing those industrial disputes. We want to work with anyone who's willing to be our ally in this fight, and that's why events such as today are so incredibly important. I hope today, and I'm very optimistic, we can strengthen the links between us all in taking on the government's cuts agenda that's harming us all and the people that we work to represent, support and, so importantly, independently advocate for. Now, I hope everybody in this room has already got October the 20th, oh dear, October the 20th in your diaries, because you know what? March the 26th, 1 million people expressed what they thought of this coalition government. On October the 20th, we've got to have a resounding voice that there is another way. Thank you so much for listening.